the Mandarin transcription, which is transcribing Mandarin words into IPA. You did that with 汉语拼音, and today we're going to learn about how to transcribe it into IPA. And once you're getting better at it, we're actually going to try some Thai for your transcription. And I'll show you there's a reason why we're learning IPA. And I read your questionnaire about some of you are not so fond of IPA. But there's a reason why these symbols, these international symbols were created. So I believe it would be really useful for you to learn other languages or including your own native language. Remember I told you that the stops in Mandarin, the distinction is not in voicing, but in aspiration. Remember I told you that? 就是中文的 b 跟 p, they don't have voicing distinctions. They have aspiration distinctions. So the person or the group of people who invented 通用拼音 decide that this is b, this is p. Do you think it makes sense? Well, it sort of makes sense. It makes sense in a linguistic, in a phonological way because p has aspiration. So that the designer used the apostrophe to denote the aspiration. But that's 通用拼音. And 汉语拼音, people would decide that, well, you know what, I think b sounds enough like the voiced b. Why don't we just use b for b, and then p for p. So after you grow older, you will find that different people have different idea about how things should be run, and they would insist that their system is the best. But my job is to tell you the international norm is 汉语拼音 now. Like it or not, I don't like it, but that's the fact. So that's why we're learning it. So transcription is also a very important thing that linguistic students have to do because sometimes when we go out into the field, transcribe languages that nobody knows. There's no dictionary. There's no one around to tell you what the correct pronunciation is. So all you have to do is interview this grandma and this grandpa and then this kid and then figure out how they say the same word and then transcribe it. And you, as a linguist, can create dictionary for the language. That's why we need IPA. And some of you mentioned that you don't like learning things about Taiwanese and Mandarin. Not that you don't like it, you just find it more difficult. Why do you think it's more difficult to learn your own native language, to learn the phonetics and phonology of your own language? 为什么会比较难呢？你就觉得我就这样讲啊。总统就是要讲总统啊，当然不讲总统。Yeah, but remember in the first class, in our intro class, I told you, linguist is like those people who like to drive manual. 喜欢开手排车 ，linguist 就好像开手排车的人。你们如果会开车的人，你们喜欢开自排车还是手排车？自排很方便啊，不用自排，不用蹭，自排就 drive， 就走了。But when you drive manual, you actually have to do 一档，然后换2档，速度对的时候你要换到3档、4档、5档。But so those people who ask why we learn things about Taiwanese and Mandarin, you can ask the same question to those people who like to drive manual because you want to know what's going on. You want to have a very fine control of the things you're doing. 你们在做一些事情的时候，可以试着不要按照你的身体走。因为我很热，所以我决定现在去找一个冷气房待下来。I mean, 你可以想一想，为什么我现在觉得很热？是我的衣服吗？还是我的心情？然后想办法去把这个因素排除，而不是只是那我去找一个冷气把这件事情结束。就是就喜欢 linguistics 的人，大概就是类似像这样子。We just want to know why we're doing some things. That's the reason. Okay, so transcription. How far are you? 你们 transcribe 到断雁叫西风了吗？ Let's have some volunteers. I want to see how you transcribe it. I want to see if you are rough. Okay, volunteers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I was in grad school, I had to take phonology with some of my beloved Arabic students. They're very nice people, but we just fight all the time when we're doing transcriptions. Because we know affricates, guys. As Taiwanese and Mandarin speakers, I was just telling our professor, Earl Jackson, that you're in the kingdom of affricates. Think about our Mandarin and Taiwanese, we have so many affricates. And so when I was in the States, when we were transcribing a language with affricates, I can tell what kind of affricates they are, but my Arabic friends, it's just so difficult for them. If their language, I don't think they have that many, I don't think they have affricates in Jordanian Arabic. So we fight a lot. And you're going to see that you're probably going to have some different opinions from these people. Now remember, in Mandarin, we don't have the voicing distinction for the stops. So whatever your b, p, d, t, g, k, they would never be voiced. 少年听雨歌楼上. Do you have any questions about this? Any of your transcription that's different from this? Anything? 上，它的诗长得怪怪的，诗，应该就，它的尾巴是 Yeah, some of you complain about this. The tiny little differences. Next time I'll be careful to draw the symbols like when you're in kindergarten. Yeah, it's with the hook. Anything with a hook, Extended hook. Shall. You should complain. There is something that's different. If there's, do you all transcribe this as u? Any of you do wa? No? Yeah, okay. Remember we talked about syllable structures. So those syllables, they should have the most sonorant segment as the nucleus. So some people like to transcribe the ah as the nucleus. And then this is the glide. This word could be a glide that's combined with the vowel to form the nucleus. So it's okay if you want to transcribe this as w or just the u sound, shao, like in cow, shao. 少年, shao. How would you read this if it's an IPA? This is nian. This is nian. What did you put here? 你们放了哪一个？我是用这个。少年，你们觉得是这个吗？ It's not 少年。The R is R。你知道吗？不是少年。汉语拼音就是这样子，汉语拼音是 NIAN， 可是我们现在用的是 IPA， 所以你要用 A 音。哪一个 IPA 是 A 音？ A red. I read the book. This is a color red. An. When it's an, it's an. Oh, this is the allophonic variation I need to tell you. Okay. How do you pronounce this word? How do you write it in ppmf? But is there an in 年？你注安对不对？然后你觉得呢一安，可是你是念 nian 吗？ Yes, this tells you R sound has an allophonic variation. In Mandarin, 你们的 R sound， 恭喜你们，你们说的中文的 R sound， 在 E 跟 N 中间的时候，它会变音。This is the allophonic variation. 在其他地方它都念安安安安安。But when it's in between E and N, it becomes 年. So that's the key thing, guys. When you do transcription, you need to be faithful to the pronunciation. But maybe I should have please add the N A sound to that cell because there are the variations. Be faithful to your pronunciation, okay? And you should have challenged me when I wrote that an, because that an is, guys, that an is actually was actually corresponding to the symbol an. So the transcription is correct, but right now you're trying to transcribe yen, and there are some variations that you just have to take into account. 这样清楚哈，就是安啊这个字会变音，它夹在 e 跟 n 中间的时候就变成烟。OK， 少年听雨歌楼上。I think that's right. 有什么问题吗 ？OK， 这个呢，这个有没有问题？哪一个？红，你觉得是哪一个？乌吗？你觉得是红吗？念起来怪怪就是不对啊。Every IPA symbol has a specific pronunciation. There's no alteration in IPA. IPA 的好处是它是1对1的，不会是1对2、3对1。我是用这个红。Remember in English we talk about that closed O has a O feature. When you're pronouncing the English, American English, the A should be A, O should be O. They're longer. So I think in this case, when you say 红, you actually don't close your mouth completely. So I'll prefer you guys using the 红、烛、昏、罗、Yeah, okay, 罗、帐. And then 壮. Okay, this you probably want to align them a little bit better. It's correct. I just think that they should be on the same level. 壮. Oh! Is this right? No. This is NG. How do you pronounce this in IPA? 壮. In IPA, you need to pronounce every single segment. So it's 壮. 壮年. Nian is again. 壮年. Ting. Okay, here. How do you pronounce this? Ting. Ting. Do you do ting or ting? Yeah, be faithful to what you're doing. You're transcribing your own pronunciation. You don't do ting, you do ting. Ting like ting. Yeah, try to think of English words. Ting. What ting? There are 3 segments in ting. 听语. This is the 课周 What's this? 庄 This is 庄 It should be 课周中是不是？中课周中 And then 江阔云低中没错吧？中断 Here 断 Oh, well, this is okay. 断雁 Oh no, this is not right. 断 This is yan. 断雁 断雁叫西 OK 风 If you're from mainland, you're probably saying 风 but in Taiwan we say 风 断雁叫西风 Just notice that for E and Y, W and Wu, you can change them they're interchangeably in the transcription. So like I promised, we're going to do some Thai. And the most useful Thai phrase is thank you. Now I'm going to ask Ina to pronounce thank you 3 times in a row. Can you stand up and face the crowd? You need to be careful with her lips because there are some bilabial coda in Thai. And we'll listen to it and then we will have her pronounce it again so you guys can transcribe it. So for the first time, just pay attention. 3次哦。
那男生的还是女生？
女生的好了。So there are gender differences. So let's hear the girls type first.
ขอบคุณค่ะขอบคุณค่ะขอบคุณค่ะ
再来一次，然后慢一点点。
哦好ขอบคุณค่ะขอบคุณค่ะขอบคุณค่ะ
Try to transcribe it with your IPA.
ขอบคุณค่ะขอบคุณค่ะขอบคุณค่ะ
哎，男生的，来，男生也要学啊，不然你们去那个泰国用女生的会被笑哎。
就是男生的话，他的那个鱼尾要有变化，前面就是一样，只是鱼尾地方就是 club， 就变成ขอบคุณครับ对，ขอบคุณ对，前面是ขอบคุณ都一样。
你把第3个音节念3次，好吧？
ขอบคุณครับขอบคุณครับขอบคุณครับ
我是说第3个音节，没关系。
就是 club club club。
Okay, volunteers. Girl number 1, girl number 2. Cop. Now we can tell the linguistic ability capacity of between boys and girls. Thank you. Okay. Yes, there is a coda P unreleased. Cop. And then the K, is this right? It should have an aspiration, guys. With the aspiration, k, cop. Kun 也有啊。然后这是卡。ขอบคุณค่ะขอบคุณคุณ Okay, native speaker, do you think you do a schwa? We're no native speakers, so do you think there's a schwa in your คุณ Okay. คุณขอบคุณค่ะ And with the tongue actually, ขอบIs it similar to our kop? Low, it's a checked syllable and kind of low. Kop. And then kun. How do you say? Kun. That's similar to our 5-5, eh? Kop. Kun. And then 卡，像我们哪一个？我说台语的卡有像 3-1 吧？卡。ขอบคุณค่ะ卡，你们不用记得痛啦 but now that you actually know it, ขอบคุณค่ะขอบ Is it คุณ or ควง This is ควงขอบคุณ Is it club or club? Club. Oh, yeah. Well, now we have to decide whether it's a voiced or Wait, is it kalap or is it with a consonant cluster or without? Is it kalap or clap? Clap. 要卷舌哦。Oh, with the trio. Crap, crap. 像那个 corruption 的 crap. 最后 crap. I think the final is a voiceless P, not a club. So let me write it again. Crap. And this is not just a R. Actual R should be upside down, remember? 这是那个 trio 那个Spanish trio. Crap. But Ina said that she cannot do the trio. Yes. So that's Thai. It's just for fun. I won't test you in the exam. Yay, I like my review session. I have a lot of pictures. They're all from Laugh Out Loud Phonology. LOL Phonology. It's a Facebook page. It's very nice, very interesting. All the people who are interested in phonology should subscribe. So, phonology, phonemes or allophones. We did some problem sets. You need to be able to tell whether two sounds are phonemes or allophones of the same phoneme. And phonology is a study that describe the representation of the sounds and sound patterns in a speaker's mental grammar. And it's also a study of sound pattern in a language, or in human language specifically. The phonology we study so far only cover human languages. So in your mind, all the things we learned before the midterm and after the midterm, can you sort of feel that we go a step wider in terms of the scale of sounds? 我们 midterm 前面的是看每一个 segment consonant 是怎么样，然后 vowel 的 formant 是怎么样。But in phonology, we start to care about how you put these sounds together. Last week, we learned about phonotactics. 什么音可以跟什么音结合在一起变成 onset？ 什么可以变成 coda？ Those are the rules of sounds to be combined. So phonology is about the law of sounds of a given language. So the phonological rule in Thai or in Spanish will be different from the phonological rule in Taiwanese and in Mandarin and in English. They all have their own laws. And if you're learning a second language, you just have to consciously learn those rules so you won't have accent. Let me tell you, most of your foreign accent when you're speaking English came from that you're not aware of their phonological rules. That's why we study phonology. And once you have the phonological knowledge of a certain language, let's say you know Mandarin. And remember last time I asked you to name a girl named Bimbai. 然后大家就会觉得没有办法说出一个 Vim 字，对不对？ Well, because you know the language of Mandarin, so you have the phonological knowledge of Mandarin, so you know when you make up words, you know what sorts of rules you need to follow, although you can't state it overtly. If I ask you to state the sound rules of Mandarin, you probably won't be able to overtly do it. 不能很明白的讲出来, but when you say things, you actually subconsciously you will follow the rules, the laws of your first language. And then you will apply phonological rules. You will always do 总统 instead of 总统. I can give you a word that you had never heard before. You will still apply that same phonological rule because you have the phonological knowledge of that language. And later we're going to talk about sometimes the same morphemes will have different pronunciations. Remember we talked about in English. The plural morpheme could be s or z or z. But as a native speaker, you know that it doesn't matter whether you pronounce it as a s or a z or s. Native English speakers will all know it means plural. Okay, so because they have the phonological knowledge of the language. And there are some terms that were introduced in week 9. You have to know what's phoneme and what's allophones. Allophones are just variations. You see them in different contexts. So did you see the 谢师宴 pictures that people are posting? So those people, they look very different from what you see, right? Yes, those are allophonic. I mean, allopersonalic. When you're in a big, when you're in a fancy hotel, they dressed up, including myself. So because of the context, you change the way, the sounds change the way they're pronounced. So they're allophones. So you can use allo to describe anything. Well, it makes sense. We change shapes when we're in different contexts. Sounds change their pronunciation in different, they will have different variations according to the environment. And I would probably never dress up like I did in the banquet when I'm teaching here. These are two complementary distributions. So in very formal situation and teaching situation, these are complementary. 就是他们组合起来是100分，可是这一个状况跟这个状况 Actually, I still have another allophonic variation, which is when I'm in the traditional market. I'll have sandals and then like 7分裤 and probably with a hat and with the umbrella. So in different contexts, you'll have different variation. And so phonemes and allophones. Morphemes also have allomorpheme. But we don't call them allomorpheme, we call them allomorphs because it's too long. And it's the same idea. The same phoneme, the same morpheme, like the plural marker, can have different shapes, depends on which word it's attached to. 所以声音会变 ，morpheme 也会变。OK， 这样可以吗？然后呢，我们还谈到 word test. This is just giving you a novel word, 盘, 顺, and having you combine it together. How would you say 盘? If I give you 2 words and you combine it together, 盘, 顺 would become 盘顺. Have you heard of 盘 before? No, I guarantee you, I made an effort. Make sure it's a non-existing Mandarin word. 顺 is also 顺. Well, okay. But that 盘, you have never heard before. I give you a novel word and test if you know the phonological rule of that phenomenon I was testing. 这种就叫 work testing. Okay? 那个 work 是一个 non-existent creature. And you don't have to do the rule ordering. I didn't do a good job explaining you what this is going on. So when you go back to look at the PowerPoint, you don't, well, it's nice if you get the hang of this, but if you don't, it's okay. So don't worry about this apply rule 1, apply rule 2, don't worry about it. You just need to know there are allomorphs for English plurals. And then there are some rules for English consonant allophones. You need to know when you will aspirate a T, when you will change into a flap, when you're changing into a glottal stop. And again, the flap is like a fish hook, like this. And glottal stop is facing the other way, and it looks like a question mark. Glottal stop. Okay, and then the R, upside down R, is just upside down R. Some of you got confused. Okay, and I introduced a reading passage. Actually, that's one thing I'm going to do differently next time I'm teaching this class. I noticed that 2/3 of you weren't too keen on the formants and the acoustic measurements of those things that we introduced before the midterm. So next time I'm teaching this class, the very first class, I'm going to ask everybody to read these 2 reading passages and have everybody analyze their own pronunciation in terms of consonants and vowels. I bet that would motivate people to pay more attention to what sounds they're pronouncing. So, well, this is just an idea that there are some reading passages out there, and there are people recording speakers from all over the world and see how they pronounce the same passage, and you can use that to practice your accent as well. And week 10, if you're trying to memorize the feature chart, you're gonna have a bad time. Do you guys remember the features? We talk about features, talk about the delay, release, sonorant, obstruent, strident, and labial coronal. So do you guys remember what I made you remember? So I'll probably have questions like I'll list 6 sounds, and I'll say, oh, coronals, and you have to circle the one that's not a coronal. 就像我们好像 quiz 也是这样考，对不对？我就给你们7、8个，然后你说，哪挑出来那个老鼠屎，哪一个不是 delay release? So it should be easier than you guys producing the thing. So, well, as South Park has just suggested, it's not, you're going to have a bad time, but yeah, we still have to do that. And there are some terms. Although some of you say that, well, it seems a bit messy after the midterm. Yeah, I admit that we only have 1 reading. And so it's harder for you to do the preview and review. So, but it also means that you don't have so many things you have to read for the midterm. So most of these things that we talk about are just concepts that's really easy to comprehend. So we talk about Japanese allophones. You should go back to, we had a Hidakana chart, and we're showing that there are 3 of them. I think 3 of them. It has bizarre pronunciation. They have some allophonic variation. Just go back to the slide, you would know. And then we introduce in English cursive writing. There are also variations. Depends on what alphabet precedes you or follows you. Your writing will be different. And there are free variations. Sometimes you say potato, sometimes you say potato. They don't mean different things. They're just free variations, like the and the, and a. I have a book, I have a book. Slight meaningful, slight differences. And then vowel harmony. There is something going on in Turkey right now. You should pay attention to the news from Istanbul. And they have a very interesting phonological phenomenon that's called vowel harmony. They have 2 types of suffixes. And apparently you only attach 1 type of suffix to certain type of root. Long story short, they have the front and back vowel harmony. If the root has a front vowel, you should attach L-E-R, ler. And if the root has a back vowel, you should attach a different suffix. So go back and review that. And believe it or not, we also talk about other languages. We have German. We talk about German devoicing Guten Tag instead of Guten Tag. And then we talk about French deletion. And filet, depot, buffet, that you delete the final consonant in certain contexts. And natural classes are just bound to the feature matrix. If you are all sonorant, you belong to the same natural class. This is just a way of grouping the sounds. There are about 40 sounds in English. You can group them according to, you're all vowels, you're all consonants, but we are all delay released. So we behave similarly to certain phonological rules, and we're both nasal. So there are tiny groups that we can describe about the sounds. And we also learn about broad and narrow transcription. So in broad transcription, usually we use the phoneme slashes. So let's say if you want to do spot, pot. Okay, let's do pot. This is pot. But if you want to do if you put it in the brackets, it means you're doing a more narrow transcription, more specific. I want to know all the dirty detail. I'm changing my idea. Can. Okay, if it's a narrow transcription, I want all the specific details of the sounds. How would you transcribe it? you need aspiration, and you need to tell me this N is nasalized because of the nasal after it. So can you tell that in narrow transcription, or what we call phonetic transcription, we tell the specific allophones. So the phone in English, the K also has many different allophones. It's aspirated when it's at the beginning of the vowel and of a word. It's not released at the end of a word, and it's just K when it's after a sky. 就是说，在 broad transcription 里面，你只要给 phoneme 就可以了。But in narrow transcription, we want all the details that you can find. You need to apply all the phonological rules that you know about English to do that narrow transcription. So that's broad and narrow transcription. And this is a conversation between these two. So what did you learn in phonology today? Some Hungarian roots have front vowels but take back vowel harmonic suffixes. Oh, you don't get it? So he's surprised because according to vowel harmony, I don't know much about Hungarian, but we can guess if they're harmonic. If they're harmony, you should have the suffix being harmonic to your root. 所以前面如果是 front vowel, 你的 suffix 也应该是一个 front vowel, 这样他们才会 harmony 嘛。然后所以那个爸爸，假设他们是爸爸跟女儿，女儿说那个竟然有一些 Hungarian root take back vowel suffix when the root has front vowel. Okay, fine, I'm nerd. Oh, by the way, I think Peter wrote that. Thank you for thank you for such a nerd's class. What's the adjective for nerd? Nerdy, yeah, it's a nerdy class. Yes, I'm training you to be all nerdy. Nerdy is not a bad thing. Okay, so we also learned about phonological rules. So these sounds, when you put them together, sometimes they want to be more like each other. Sometimes they want to be less like each other. So it's easier to pronounce or to hear. And sometimes you delete sounds, sometimes you insert sounds, and sometimes you swap them to pronounce the sound. So these are the rules that you need to know. We'll probably give you examples and you do the matching. So if A turned into B, that's what? Assimilation or dissimilation. And I won't ask you to write the phonological rules because I didn't train you enough. But I probably will have the rule there and you can interpretate what's going on. So if you have to interpret what's going on here, how would you say it? Oh, this should be changed into, usually we put the underlying one in between slashes, but this is just a feature matrix. 我们写 feature 的时候，有时候会用这个 bracket. This is, oh, actually I have it here. If you have a velar consonant, it would change into a palatal consonant when it precedes a front vowel. The front and back 一般我们都用 minus back 或 plus back 来那个说明。Okay, so you should be able to read this kind of phonological rules. So how would you describe this? A K between slashes turned into a K in brackets in the environment of this. 你可以说这个环境出来吗？用说的。我说这个如果用说的，你怎么说？一个 innocent 的 K， 这个 K 就会 remain as K when it's after a s。看你们讲 sky 有没有？对，所以我可能会写这种 rule 出来，然后你们就要记得 this means the environment for that whatever to happen. Is that clear? Okay. And syllable structures. For all the syllables, we have the onset and we have the rhyme. 就像这个有一个 onset 老鼠，这个是什么？土拨鼠，就不知道是哪一种鼠，我忘了。And you have the rhyme. Rhyme can be written as rhyme or rhyme. It's okay. And inside the rhyme, you have the nucleus and the coda. And then in week 13 and 14, we learned about Tagalog. We learned about the infix of Tagalog. And then we also learn /p/m/f and Hanyu Pinyin. You should know that both systems have their limitations. And you did the Hanyu Pinyin transcription, and we also learned about Taiwanese tones. I will ask you, this is one of the questions I already have in mind. I will ask you to write the tone sandy circle for Taiwanese. And that shouldn't be a problem for you now. And it's only for the long tones. It will not include the checked syllables. So all you have to do is tell me what's going on here. And another question I have for you. So you need to know the tone sandy circle. And we also introduce syllable contraction. We talk about there are 3 types that when you merge, sometimes we just merge 2 syllables in Taiwanese. And all you have to do is remember these 4 types. This case is tricky because we are actually having 2 output. So it would be easier if you just pay attention to the second type. How about? 那个同学说的是说 if it's the case, it shouldn't be in type 2. Think about it. If the output is be, bo, a become be, it should belong to type 3. It's a dual. Only one can exist. But in this case, because there are 2 types, so that student was confused. Why do you put this one here? But the fact is it has 2 kinds of output. And in my dialect, we say bue, bue. It's not just be, be. So why? You can go back to your slide. Why don't you just cross this out so it will be less confusing? If you only focus on this example, it will be the same as the rest of the samples. And you need to remember there is such thing called sonority sequencing. So for all the syllables, you want the sonority to go up and then go down. And the reason why we delete these things that's in the way is because it's destroying our sonority sequencing. So you need to know which one is more sonorant than the other. So vowels are more sonorant than consonants. But within vowels themselves, the low vowels are more sonorant than the rest. So you just have to go back and remember the sonorancy scale. And this is also another thing I'm going to put in the final. You guys know about this already. If you know the tone sandy circle, you should be able to write out the tones here. But I want you to go home and practice with your friends and tell me the tone sandy patterns in the first syllable of exactly these 5 phrases. Non-native speakers, I'm sorry, you just have to work with people who speak the language. So this is pang, pang. So there's a rising tone. Pang, pang, dam, dang. But this is yu, 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 yu. Jing, jing, jing. So there are 2 kinds of tone sandy that's happening here, and you have to find it out yourself. There are 2 types. Here's the hint. So can you make up an assumption? When would you have the and when would you follow the original sandy rule to create that first syllable? 这样清楚吗？我就是会问你们这一题。请问在台语的这5个字里头，有两种变调的方法。什么样？为什么有一些是这样变，为什么有一些是那样变？你能不能提出你的说法 ？You can discuss with your fellow students and come up with the theory. And you can look it up too. It's all on the web. But neither I or the TA will provide the correct answer. I want you to think about why this is the case. Okay, and then later, last week we talked about phonotactics. We talked about how you can clip the names to make them shorter. And so I'll probably give you a real English or made up English name, and you have to give me the suffix to hypochoristic form. I'll give you Hilda, and you'll do Hildy, something like that. And then we talk about McGurk effect. It's an illusion between your auditory and visual system. And we talk about Pig Latin. And there's consonant initial words, vowel initial words, and there are compound words. So I'll probably give you a word and you just have to convert it to Pig Latin. So in other words, this final has very little surprises. If you can nail the Hanyu Pinyin, transcription, Pig Latin, these are all, I mean, you should be able to get good grades, okay? And oh, this is a cat showing nasal retroflex. Yeah, and we heard you need tokens for high back vowels. How does owls say things? Woo, woo, woo. 猫头鹰怎么叫啊？ Woo, woo, woo. Is that a high back vowels? So you have a bunch of owls showing up as volunteers. And my vocal track is a series of tubes. And consonant clusters. Consonant clusters, many languages don't like consonant clusters. And Japanese deal with it by inserting vowels to break the consonant cluster. But how about Spanish? How would the Spanish non-native English speaker say school? Think about school. Is there any consonant cluster in school? Sk, right? And in how would a Spanish person say school? You add an A. So once you add an A, that first S, A, let's say it's an A sound. Yeah, once you add the A sound, the S become the coda of that A sound, and K become the onset of the second syllable. So there's no consonant clusters. The so-called consonant clusters are they're both in the onset position or they're both in the coda position. 那种在一起的才叫 cluster. But Japanese people, because of their phonology, they'll probably, what do you think a Japanese person would do to pronounce a word like school? Su. Well, you can either insert E or U. Let's say they do U. Would this be okay for a Japanese speaker? No, they don't like anything in the coda position except for nasals. So this L is still not okay. So they probably add another vowel or simply get rid of it. Hamburger. Originally it's hamburger with the R, right? So, but when you say hamburger, you get rid of that R. That's one way to deal with it. So different language speakers will have different way to solve the phonological problems they have. Apparently, not many people like consonant clusters. Okay, this is the last slide. Well, after phonetics and phonology, you're going to move on to syntax. In phonology, we teach you how to combine sounds together, and there are rules that you have to obey. But for syntax, isn't this a great tree? Yeah, it's a sentence. It's formed by a noun phrase and a verb phrase. And inside this noun phrase, you can use triangle to, and the Randy teacher, and then verb phrase start with a verb, and the noun phrase and prepositional phrase. Turn syntax into a role-playing game. So when you move on to syntax, they will teach you how you can combine words together. 那个 scale 又再往外扩一层了. So what types of words can be put together? You need your determiner, your noun, and then your preposition with the noun phrase. That's the rules for words. And we're introducing the rules for sounds. So linguistics is all about finding the rules that's behind the language you speak. That's it. So if you're not into looking up the rules, maybe you can consider the literature track. But if you're fascinated by their rules for sounds and words, you can consider taking more linguistic classes, including the seminar that I'm teaching next term.